You know, there's a lot of conversation in this building today about one of the provisions that's holding up the omnibus, they're saying, is this Cuba travel, families traveling back to Cuba. I have strong opinions about that as well. Suffice it to say that, and it's important that my colleagues know that what we're asking for, what's being asked for in the omnibus, and what will be coming over here if it's kept in, won't prohibit families from traveling to Cuba. It'll just limit the amount that they can, and that's a wise policy, one that I support, because it limits access to hard currency to a really tyrannical regime. I'm here to talk about a different part of Cuba policy, however, Cuba travel, which doesn't get a lot of notice these days, but it's part of conversations that are ongoing with the administration and the State Department with regards to some of the appointments that they have in the Western Hemisphere, and that is the so-called people-to-people travel. I have here in my hand an immediate release from January 14th of 2011 titled Reaching Out to the Cuban People. It came from the President, where he announced a series of steps to continue efforts to reach out to the Cuban people in support of their desire to freely determine their country's future. One of the changes they made is to something they call purposeful travel. And it says here, the President believes that these actions, which I'm about to describe, combined with the continuation of the embargo, are important steps in reaching the widely shared goal of a Cuba that respects the basic rights of all its citizens. So right here in this release, and I'm glad he wrote it, the President is stating that in combination with the embargo, the steps that he wanted to take, the goal of these steps, was reaching the widely shared goal of a Cuba that respects the basic rights of all of its citizens. That's the reason why he made these policy changes. So far, so good. Let me tell you one of the policy changes. It's called Restore Specific Licensing of Educational Exchanges Not Involving Academic Study Pursuant to a Degree Program under the auspices of an organization that sponsors and organizes people-to-people programs. Now, what that means in plain English is that this is not colleges or universities. These are organizations not for degree credits, educational in purpose, but not for degree credits. And what we want to do is encourage them or allow them the opportunity to take Americans to Cuba under their auspices. Again, remember the goal here is to bring about, as the President stated, the widely shared goal of a Cuba that respects the basic rights of all its citizens. That's the purpose of these trips. Well, I decided to look up some of these trips, and let's see some of the itineraries, because they're very interesting. Let me read you one. This one is from an organization called Insight Cuba. It's located in New York. I'm not going to advertise their website, let them pay for that, but I'll tell you this. I'll tell you their itinerary for something called the Cuban Music and Art Experience. Sounds interesting. The Cuban Music and Art Experience. Let's go to some of the highlights. Day 2 in Havana, you're going to get to meet with the Castro Ministry of Culture to learn how Cuba promotes the arts on this diverse island. You're also going to get to spend the evening, and this will become a familiar theme here, dusting off your dancing shoes, because tonight you will head off to Casa de la Música. Here you'll enjoy performances by local Cuban artists, and of course, dance. They put an exclamation mark after that. This is an important part of this trip. This is day 2 of this trip designed to promote, as the President wrote, the widely shared goal of a Cuba that respects the basic rights of its citizens. Day 3 is interesting too. You get to go to this place called Casa de la Amistad, which basically means friendship house. And there you will meet with your Cuban hosts, quote unquote, which I would bet you right now are members of the Castro government, and perhaps enjoy another exciting musical performance. And you spend the evening of day 3 back at Casa de la Música for some incredible salsa music and dancing. Now, day 4 is the real highlight of this trip. This is not to be missed. You get to fly to Santiago de Cuba, and guess where you get to visit? You get to visit a place called Cuartel Moncada, which is basically an old army barracks where, in July 26 of 1952, Fidel Castro launched the Cuban Revolution. You get to visit this place where Fidel Castro's revolution actually began. Imagine that. I can see where that begins to further the widely shared goal of a Cuba that respects the basic rights of all its citizens. And guess what you get to do that night? You guessed it. You get to spend the night at a local dance club to hear performance by Cuba's most popular artists, and you get to dance. It goes on and on. Day 5 has dancing. Day 6, you get to visit the historic Granma province, which is known as the birthplace of Cuban nationality. You get to meet with the Cuban Institute for Friendship Between the People, which is a very catchy title. And that night, you get to spend the evening at Casa de la Trova to dance and take in performance of Cuban artists. It goes on and on, day 7, day 8. So this is quite an adventure in pursuit of the government and a Cuba that respects the basic rights of all his citizens. Let me share another one. This one is interesting too. Well, before I get to that one, I think this is another Inside Cuba one. This one takes you on day 1. This is called the Havana Jazz Experience. And on day one, it takes you to explore the famous Cathedral Square, the City Museum, the Havana Club Rum Museum. It's part of this effort to bring about freedom and democracy in Cuba. You get to go there. And at night, you go to the jazz club La Zorra y el Cuervo. And there you get to do some of the best dancing you can ever imagine in a very intimate setting. Very intimate setting. Day two brings you to Cojimar, which is the village where the setting for The Old Man and the Sea that won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1952, Ernest Hemingway. Very interesting. You get to sit there at night, and then you get to go up to the hills where you get to learn about the religion of Santeria, which is basically an Afro-Cuban religion. You get to learn all about that. And then at night, you get to go back to Havana, you guessed it, for dancing at a local jazz club. Day three, you get to go to the infamous now, I've already mentioned it before, Casa de la Amistad. It's a historic mansion where you will have the opportunity to observe a forum regarding U.S.-Cuba relations put together by the Cuban government. Very interesting in pursuit of the Cuba, who's the goal of Cuba that respects the basic rights of all its citizens. You spend the night at a jazz cafe where the seaside view is almost as impressive as the musicians who play there nightly. And I imagine, I'm guessing now, I'm not sure, but there might be some dancing involved on night number 4 in Cuba. Night number 5 is quite interesting too, because there you get to learn from the actual Cuban musicians about the sensual and passionate rhythms of their music, and you round out the day with a 2-hour salsa class. In furtherance of freedom, democracy, and a country that, that's trip number 2. There's a lot of these. There's one more. This one's really good. This one's called Cuba for Educators, Ethics and the Revolution. So you go to Cuba to learn about ethics from the Castro regime. On day 1, you get to visit, day 2, because day 1 you're probably tired from the dancing. Day 2, you get to go to the Museum of the Revolution, where you will learn about the ethical foundations of the Cuban Revolution. This is not to be missed. Clearly, we want to learn about ethics from the Castro regime. Then you get to go to the Literacy Museum, where you get to learn about Cuba's war on illiteracy, which was one of Fidel Castro's goals in his 1960 speech for the United Nations. And day number 3, you get to meet the Ministry of Public Health, which I assure you is a government employee, because it sounds like it. Ministry of Public Health. And you get to discuss why revolutionary ethics demand free public health care while our own society will not even consider it. Very interesting. It goes on. And by the way, there's a bunch of dancing in this one too, but I think you get the point. This one's run by a group called the Center for Cuban Studies. Why do I say all this? It's pretty simple. Look, there's this sports show, I think it's on ESPN on Sunday nights, where they review NFL highlights, and Michael Irvin, who's a great player, he has this segment called Come On, Man, where they put some ridiculous thing that happened today, and he'll say, come on, man. When I look at this stuff, you know what I want to say? I say, come on, man. This is about promoting democracy and freedom in Cuba? This is not about promoting democracy and freedom in Cuba. This is nothing more than tourism. This is tourism for Americans that at best are curious about Cuba and at worst sympathize with the Cuban regime. Now you may ask, we're a free society. Why would we restrict that? And here's why. Because this is not just a source of irritation. This is a source of hard currency, of millions of dollars in the hands of the Castro government that they use to oppress the Cuban people and to jail and hold hostage an American citizen who today is being held hostage in Cuba, Alan Gross. And by the way, after they took him hostage, we implemented this policy. So this policy is a reward for what? So here's my challenge to the administration of the State Department. Look, I know you're not going to change your mind. I know you believe in this people-to-people stuff. I know someone has sold you a bill of goods that this people-to-people travel is a good idea and will further democracy and freedom in Cuba. I get that. You're not going to change your mind. But at least examine how this is being implemented, because this is a charade. This is an embarrassment. These people are getting licenses to conduct this outrageous tourism, which quite frankly borders on indoctrination of Americans by Castro government officials. And so I hope we'll continue to look at this, and that this administration, as part of its Western Hemispheric approach, will look at these trips for what they are. They're an outrage. They're grotesque. And they're providing hard currency to a regime that oppresses its people, who jails people because they disagree with the government. It's wrong. This is not what we're about as a country. This cannot be what we defend. Even if you agree with this people-to-people theory and concept, you cannot justify how this program is being implemented, or these people that are getting licenses to conduct these kinds of trips. So I hope that we will, in our conversations with the State Department, about their appointments in the Western Hemisphere, and in specific, the nomination of Roberta Jacobson, I hope we'll use that as an opportunity to examine how these programs are being implemented, because quite frankly, they're outrageous.